Hello, all my lily pals. How y'all doing tonight? I am. What other word could I think of to use than excited? Holy shit. Um, yeah, tonight, is a very, very special stream that I have had planned up for at least a couple of weeks. Um, and So far, it seems like everything is in working order to allow it all to happen because probably the biggest, most crucial aspect of tonight's stream is the fact that here beside me you can see my lovely, beautiful, gorgeous, creative, wonderful, absolutely brilliant wifey, Stellar Empress. Say hi, babe.
Hey, with an intro like that, I'm gonna have to try not to cry on this stream. But welcome, everybody. This is not my first time behind the camera? Sure, with this channel, but I am so excited to be here.
Yay! Um, Also, I beg of you, my lily pals, for tonight, I am desperately asking how the audio quality is because I really want to make sure I don't fudge it up like I did in the last Wildermyth collab stream. So let me know how good everything sounds. And thank you, Huffleclaw. Thank you. She is adorable.
Aw, you do though.
We.
We, we are the cutest.
We. Okay. um, so I guess, I feel it only appropriate since, you are, um, even if there may be, plans for future collabs in the future, Department of Redundancy Department, nevertheless, why don't you give a brief introduction, wifey?
Of course, darling. So I am Stellar. I use she, they pronouns, and I am, for the most part, a TTRPG streamer and voice actor
Yes.
over on the Off the Table channel.
Which you, what is it? Like you're a co-producer?
hmm I am one of the main showrunners there. We're on a little bit of a hiatus right now, but we are hoping to get back into the swing of things in the next couple of months. So keep an eye out.
Woo woo! Um, and I know, like, you're probably not actively doing it as much now that you're back in school, but I know, like, you also do, or have done, like, um, a little bit of wood burning for dice boxes.
That's true. I am a pyrographer, if we want to go for the fancy word for it. I semi professionally just sort of burn artwork into wood, and I especially like doing it for dice boxes because TTRPGs are kind of my lifeblood.
As I perfectly understand based on certain secret projects you have in the works.
Secret projects? Me? Never. I don't know what you're talking about.
I have the sacred ancient knowledge. Which, by the way, before I forget, it would probably be a pretty good idea if I just plugged your Twitter right there. You can find my wifey over there. and all of her various TTRPG shenaniganry and anything adjacent. So yeah. Alright.
Aw.
Um, yeah, check out my wifey, support my wifey. Um, anyhow, for tonight's stream, I have something very special, very particular that I wanted to do. And I am ever so thankful that my wife here, Stellar, has remained completely blind to it for the 2 weeks this has been, like 2 or 3 weeks that this has been in the planning stages. I'm going to show her various imagery of an ebook called All Tomorrows, written by one C.M. Kozman, or under the alias Nemo Ramjet. What this ebook is about is it kind of dabbles in mainly in a speculative biology, evolution. It is absolutely a sci-fi book, and there is like semblances of a plot as well as like showcasing a lot of the various creations that are featured in the book. So, in essence, to kind of summarize without giving too much away, basically this book features members of humanity essentially being spread across space, and through certain happenstances, they sort of evolve into post-humans of various varieties. Some retain some familiarity, and others look downright bizarre. And I'm gonna be showcasing them all to my wife, but you know, I also encourage my Lily pals here in the audience tonight to give their own little ideas or reactions if y'all haven't heard or seen of this ebook yourselves. So, I am about all ready to get this show on the road. How about you, wife?
Let's go.
Alright, so, first things first. Now you are allowed to peek into the Discord screen share.
Dun-dun.
Here we have the first picture.
Oh.
It's not too much to really remark on. I can zoom in just a bit. At least on Discord. I can't do it on OBS. It's gonna be a slideshow for y'all. What do you think? What do you think's going on here?
I mean, my first impression is sort of like, it's more emphasized like Neanderthal, like bone structure. Like the forehead is a little bit more forward, the jaw is protruding a bit. So I feel like it's just more primate evolution. Nothing in particular stands out at the moment, but I feel like there are details that I've missed.
Alright. Well, your ideas are not terribly off the mark. In fact, they're hardly off the mark at all. You see, the only difference here between, like, modern-day humanity and this person, or the race that this person hails from, is that this is a person who is essentially set to live life on a newly terraformed Mars. So simply put, they are a Martian human.
Okay.
And so yeah, there's aspects given like Martian gravity is lower than Earth, as well as like its atmospheric makeup. Um, I mean terraforming and whatnot, but
Mm.
um, so lesser gravity first and foremost would usually indicate like the need for like the Martians would definitely like over time grow to be leaner, kind of taller,
Mm-hmm.
and um, about the most that's there is to say about lore. Um, Basically, humanity terraformed and began colonizing Mars, um, and the process was that basically the terraforming came first, so that when the people who were best suited for life on Mars, when they arrived, they would essentially not be not have to be standing or settling into like um, kind of like barren wasteland and sandstorms and whatnot, in protective spacesuits. They would
Mm-hmm.
essentially be stepping onto the planet, barefoot, and there's lush grass beneath them. So um, they pretty much had everything all set from the get go. And um, as is kind of a regular trend with humanity, um, eventually the Martians, when they started to become more self sufficient, they wanted to establish independence from Earth. And, um, there was, you know, Earthlings were kind of inclined to throw a bit of a hissy fit over it. Um, and so the result was sort of an intersolar system war between Earth and Mars. And
Oh, fun. Not so much for everyone caught in the middle of it, but it's fun for the history books.
yeah, and believe me, like over time, it got really bad. Like, it's distinctly described in the book, like, it wasn't nearly as flashy as, like, a whole lot of sci fi movies would depict. Like, there were no, uh, like, spaceship battles or dogfights or whatnot, or, like, any celebratory war heroes or anything. Like, this war got so bad that it almost wiped both of them out. And kind of like as a last ditch effort to preserve humanity on both sides, they were like, hey, let's calm the fuck down. Um, and maybe let's get along. um, and so that's basically what ended up happening. Like there was a lot of bloodshed, like millions, billions of lives lost, but nevertheless, like the future of humanity remains at the forefront of our focus. So, um, yeah, so that's kind of the little story of Earth and Mars and the Martians here. Um, Next up, here.
Drum roll. In- Interesting. Huh. Okay.
Thoughts?
The only thing I can think is just a big set of ellipses in my head. It's like, I. Okay, let's try this. So, cranium size has expanded. It has become more triangular and more gaunt from the looks of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that this clothing is made out of a natural material that's native to whatever new place these post-humans are currently residing in.
That's a pretty fair assumption. Um, so,
Hmm.
what you are looking at here is kind of what solidified the like kind of the union between Earth and Mars, where there was sort of this set uh, category demographic of humanity that Earth and Mars had a hand in creating, or at least genetically engineering, um, into these, which are labeled as the Star People. And they are specifically um, successors of humanity that are best suited for colonizing other star systems and other planets. This is basically the product of like humanity collectively going, hey, like our solar system is only so big, and we already know a lot about it, but you know, we could probably stand to expand, a bit. And so they essentially sort of engineered, or I guess like bred, um, like a new sort of race, species of humanity to take on that very task. Um,
Hey,
and, you know, uh, as they were sent out into the stars, it went overall pretty well. Um, they colonized a myriad of other planets, um, as well as terraformed others. As far as like interplanetary, interstellar, interstellar empress, um, um, as far as their progress, like it was kind of a golden age for humanity, honestly, and sort of these post-humans, they didn't really run into too many other troubles um,
mm-hmm.
in their pursuits. And um, I, I do know that the book spells out um, there was kind of like, even despite like the smooth sailing of these space ventures, um, there was sort of I guess the best way I could describe it is like an a glitch, sort of. Whether it's in like the psychology of the Star People, or the results of like having to travel so long, um, just between solar systems or whatnot. But
Mm-hmm.
at one point, like the Star People kind of developed a weird sort of complex the about like the computer and machine systems that a lot of them were raised with. Um, Essentially, like, um, like being raised for many generations, like in these starships, like, I'm not sure if it really describes exactly why this happened. It just kind of happened. Like, there was a number of star people that kind of like started to look fondly on like the starship's functions that were responsible
Okay.
for like taking care of them for so long. Like
So like parents or more like machine god?
parents.
That's not the direction I thought that was going to go. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Hello, Rui. Yeah, that's a well, hmm. It goes a little bit above imprinting, let's just say. Um um
Oh. Oh, I see.
yeah.
Oh my.
Um and so like there was kind of a struggle as far as like perpetuating future generations of star people. Not the entirety, but um, like it was definitely like sort of an issue that had to be experienced. And you know, being already like X number of light years away from Earth and Mars from the Sol system, like there's nothing that original like OG humans can do about it. Like it just kind of played out rather uncomfortably.
I feel uncomfortably is the gentlest word you could have used to describe that. Like, I've only got implications to work with, but I think I've got enough. I have enough of them.
Yeah. Um. So yeah,
Fascinating.
that's about all there is to remark currently on the star people. Um. Still, nevertheless, like very technologically advanced, very intelligent, as you can see the from their bulging crowns. Yeah. Um,
Big brain energy. I understand.
yeah. Um, so next we have here. Oops.
Okay.
Nope. There we go. All right. So, uh, first impressions.
I have so many questions. Like, I don't even have an. My first impression is what?
um,
Okay. Okay. So, like, I need a second to formulate thoughts. But
and
if you
what?
would like to explain what we're doing
Yeah.
to Rui.
So Rui, I have my wife Stellar Empress here, and I'm making her react to all the various images and stuff that is provided in a sci-fi speculative evolution slash biology ebook called All Tomorrows. And the book is basically about the directions that humanity goes in the far future, um, as far as like um, evolution and stuff is concerned. And it takes many, many wild directions.
No kidding. Okay. Before I answer your question, I have one of my own.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is are these being presented in order of increasing weirdness? Like, have we only begun to scratch the surface?
Not quite. I'm featuring them in a chronological order.
Okay, I see. I see.
Picked up on multi-generational space travel. You are correct. Yes, this story, these stories take place over the course of vast stretches of time, as well as vast stretches of distance across the galaxy. Yes, yes.
And with a little hint of rapid fire genetic engineering thrown in for flavor.
Mm-hmm.
I Okay. So we have an inverted Vitruvian man
Mm-hmm.
with a, I believe that is a gun or a welding torch. I'm assuming gun,
Um,
I think.
I will say, like, the book doesn't really describe what it is.
It looks like it looks like fire, and
Yes.
that looks like the handle of a like handmade object. Whether or not it's a weapon, I have no idea.
Up to interpretation.
Fuck, babe, it sure is.
um,
Okay, so we have the main body, and then what looks like an exploding balloon, and an inside-out moth. I I don't know. Give me the spiel. I need answers. A blowtorch. Yeah, I see it now. A
yeah.
blowtorch is probably a better way to describe it. Thank you, Rui.
Um, okay. So, in all fairness, what you are looking at is not actually a post-human, but is rather an alien species.
Uh, it
And
was a good question.
and so these uh, these sort of dragonfly-looking motherfuckers, they are known simply as the Q, like QU, just Q.
Okay.
And they are, in this story, the first, like, intelligent alien species that humanity and post-humans have ever encountered. Um, and so, over here to the left, um, actually, I'll explain first their role as far as their introduction. Um, so basically, um, as humanity started colonizing various places and systems across the galaxy, um, they noticed. I know there was one image that I just kind of left out just for expediency, but
Mhm.
as they uh, as they expanded and like colonized various worlds, like inevitably they did come across like various animal life, animal alien plant species across different planets. Um, and on one such planet, they found something very odd. Um, so it's funny to me how often in sci-fi intelligent aliens. Yeah, yeah, that's kind of a consistent, a consistent deal. Um, anyway, so on one particular planet, they found that a lot of the organisms, the native organisms, had they essentially had endoskeletons that instead of being comprised of calcium like our skeletons, they were comprised mostly of copper. Um, and
Interesting.
in their biology, at least most of the animal species had sort of a tripedal sort of body plan, like three-legged um, and such. But what these star people encountered was another organism that looked very suspicious because it resembled kind of like it had it was like a perfect fusion dance between like Earth's prehistoric dinosaurs and as well as Earth's like modern day birds. Um, and the organism in question like just didn't match like with any of the other native fauna like calcium skeletons. It had four limbs. It had I know like some like the depicted native species had like proboscis sort of deals. whereas this creature had conventional, like, bird jaws. It had, like, a beak and feathers and everything, and it was very out of place. Three-legged lightning rod beings? Maybe? Maybe, depends on, like, the makeup of the planet, I suppose. That's up to speculation.
But it's very cool.
Yeah. Um, and so, um, with the discovery of this random dino bird organism, uh, like, humanity was kind of wondering, like, did did somebody, like, come by Earth and, like, steal some birds and genetically modify them into these and then brought them over here? Um, and so, like, it did result in things like resurgences of religion, like, like there was this primordial creator that's responsible for all the life in the galaxy and whatnot, and everything that comes attached to that. But nevertheless, over time, they inevitably ran into the Q. And so the Q, as kind of like their own alien empire, they were a nomadic species, or like space people, space bugs, and they basically ran epoch-spanning, like, voyages from one spiral arm of the Milky Way to another.
Oh, wow.
And, like, that was just kind of part of their culture. And they reached a point in technological advances where essentially, like, their ability to genetically modify various organisms was, like, godlike. Like, they could do virtually whatever they wanted with any organism they found. And very unfortunately, the Q also kind of have something of a god complex. Part of their, like, a lot of them follow this ideology that they have, like, this very specific vision for life throughout the galaxy, and, like, they're kind of taking up the mantle to kind of shape it, to kind of shape or reshape it on their own whims, on their own desires, like, based on what they best see fit. And so when they came across the Star People, they noticed that a lot of those planets were, like, terraformed and modified, without their knowing. And so the Q overall were not very happy about it.
Understandably. Like, someone else is playing in my sandbox?
Yeah.
Not while I can fucking fly about it.
And so essentially, what ended up happening was the Q exhaustively tried to find every trace of humanity and the Star People on this sort of intergalactic crusade to not only, like, essentially, like, extinct the human empire, but also to kind of take human subjects, post-human subjects, and do what they do best, like, modify them and change them irrevocably and extensively from their original forms. And kind of like the first half of the book is seeing, like, only a handful of some of the creations that the Q were responsible for. And, as is the Q's way,
Mhm.
I think it was like, I can't remember exactly, but like it was tens of millions of years that the Q spent time kind of overseeing their creations, and then eventually moving on with, um, moving on to the next galactic spiral arm, and basically abandoning all of their creations to mess around with whatever other people that they happen to find. Um, and so um, the two the two little dudes that you see here on the left is specifically a kind of like a nano drone um, that the Q utilized, and then over here is kind of like an organic organism that they kind of used to trace um, like humanity's genetic makeup, so that they could disassemble and then reconfigure it all and um, do whatever they want with it. Um,
Okay, so we have like organic drones and basically genome encoders.
yes.
That's that is seriously cool. Also agreed, Rui.
Yeah, really. Um, and they are spelt like this. It's just QU. Um,
So
and
you could say that their galaxy spanning voyage of genetic abandon is a crusade.
precisely.
Oh goodness. Please continue.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, with the introduction of the Q, that basically leads into, um, sort of like the primer for the subsequent images you will find now. So, first on the list,
Okay.
um,
All right.
so because this is Twitch and I don't, I don't want to take any risks. Um, I did censor any naughty bits as necessary. Um, so sorry. Look. Oh dear. In that
It's
case,
just sentient peeled bananas. It's fine.
yes,
Don't
yeah,
worry.
absolutely. They are they are just fleshy cucumbers.
Oh gosh. Why? That's so much worse. I love you so much, but why?
Was the first thing that came to mind. Oh, by the way, just real quick, Rui, let me know if Stellar can be heard with as good of quality as possible. I know I had problems in a previous collab stream regarding audio, so just let me know if there are any issues, if there's any tweaks I need to make. Um, is that your full reaction then?
I have more I have more coherent words now that I have collected myself? Sure. Let's call it that.
And she sounds good.
So,
Okay.
okay, good. Okay, so sentient banana slash fleshy cucumber. Another phrase that will never leave my mind. Thank you. Thank you for that. So they remind me of like eels broadly, but the claws are more reptilian. They
Hmm.
or avian, either way. They sort of remind me of the at least the shape of a gecko's like hind claws, and
Hmm.
I see their front I hesitate to use the word paw, but they do have one claw, presumably for digging. They seem like a burrowing species.
Mm-hmm. That makes me think
And
of...
also a lack of eyes? I think that's a nose. So yeah, they look like tapeworms. And like they look somewhere between tapeworms and moles.
Well, you are about right on the money, because these are the worms. Um, these post-human animals, were essentially reduced and elongated to about the length of your average human arm. Um, and if you if you look carefully in this middle one here, you do see that they do have eyes. However, they are about like pinprick size. And then
Yeah.
here you see the undersides, and like these are the nostrils of their noses. Yes, and their whole deal is that they were formerly star people that were occupying a planet that over time grew very, very hot. Um, like, way too hot to even live on the surface. So, um, what ended up happening with the worms is they burrowed underground and they thrived. And, so, like, they were protected from the heat, and being underground, they had very little use for things like eyesight.
Hmm.
Um, and naturally, the Q also reduced their brain power and their intelligence by a significant amount, so they really were reduced to nothing more than animals. Um, and um, essentially, the most that could be said as far as their behavior, um, firstly, you are correct that the their forelimbs were primarily used for digging, and I think I think where these claws come from specifically are like where their thumbs were. Um,
Okay, that makes sense.
and yeah, um, and so like about the average daily struggle of these worms were that anything that they found was edible, they ate it, and sometimes they would even eat each other if they didn't want to mate with each other. And as as relatively like lowly of an existence it was, they thrived. They did pretty all right, um, regardless of their circumstances. Opposable claws, maybe, um, maybe, um, and so like yeah, those are the worms. That's about. There's not really too much going on with them. Uh, Next.
It will live on forever in my memory. As will these. Okay. I'm getting. There's a lot going on here. So immediately I'm reminded of an elephant,
Mm-hmm.
just in terms of like stature, and the way that I'm going to assume that is either a trunk or a proboscis. It's just the way it all comes together.
Jabberwocky wearing a fried egg face mask.
Oh, bless you, Ruby. I I can see the egg for sure. My brain jumps like it's sort of like an owl's face. Like the eyes are clearly
Yeah.
meant to take in as much light as physically possible.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that tree next to it is to scale, because if so, these
Um, so, the background is these are known as the Titans. Um,
Fitting.
so, to answer your question right off the bat, yes, this is to scale. They measure about 40 meters tall, and they live across like vast savanna like biomes. Um, you may notice if you pay really close attention, like if I zoom in, these are just like the bags under their eyes. Like,
Oh, I have never felt more seen. It's just me. Oh, their eyes are so much smaller than I realized.
yeah.
Goodness grievance.
Mm-hmm. Um, so, yes, you are absolutely correct that they share quite a lot in common with Earth's elephants, in that specifically their lower lip muscles were elongated and stretched out to work as functionally like a trunk, because you can just barely make out, like, they have like stubby vestigial thumbs,
Mhm.
but they're kind of useless to do anything. So they mainly relied on this lip trunk to like manipulate and change their environment around a little. Um, so despite their size, they are very much gentle giants. Um, and as far as the Q's like early work goes, they were actually some of the few that managed to like kind of rebound back into intelligence like somewhat quickly, like within like a few thousand years or so.
Mhm. It
Um,
is pretty fast.
yeah. Um, and so they did sort of readapt or like reinvent things like language and communication, and like we're kind of on the precipice of like developing like proto agriculture, and sort of kind of reassuming sort of like something akin to like the early hunter-gatherer days of early humanity, like the Cro-Magnon and Neanderthals. Um, and like yeah, it was a common thing, like as they grew in intelligence, like they would easily recount like oral histories and stories and myths in vast booming voices. Um, However, the bad news is being creatures that are best suited for like a very temperate, warm, savanna sort of environment. They were
Mhm.
they were kind of blindsided by a sudden, very harsh ice age, and it effectively wiped them all out. Um, so they didn't really get much chance to develop further than just hunter gatherers. Um, but yeah, the Titans, like, in stark contrast to the worms that are only about the length of your average arm, like 40 meters, how much does that translate? I wonder. 40 meters to
About 115 feet, I think.
131.2 feet.
Ah, I was converting in the wrong direction. Fair enough.
Um,
That is massive.
yeah.
Okay, I know the book probably didn't cover this, but I have to know now. Like, there's with megafauna especially, there's like the mass the no, the surface area versus volume issue, and I just
Mm-hmm.
have to know how the Q solved that with things so large.
Um, well, I think that question may possibly be answered in a future like in a future entry.
Uh,
Um,
oh, oh my.
I know that I think by far like the Titans were the largest of all the post-humans in the book. Um, like 40 meters, 130 feet. Like clearly like bigger than their pachyderm inspirations.
By a long shot.
Hmm. So continuing forth, this one's a little more basic.
Okay. Okay. So, what do we have here? We have spotting, which is usually taught with camouflage. We have like sharpened claws and hind paws with digitigrade legs. This is, I'm assuming this is a hunter species.
Hmm.
Like the forward-facing eyes, the sharp everything. My brain immediately jumps to a chupacabra, though I'm not sure if that's really the vibe they were going for. It's it's fascinating and deeply unsettling. Tell me more.
Well, first, hello, Saladin. Man After Man. No, that's a different book. This is all tomorrow's. Um, although they are very easily comparable. Um, they are both like speculative evolutions as far as like humanity is concerned. Um, the vacuum orbs, like, I think that's probably um, yeah, that's a different book for a different day. Um, so here, what this organism, this is what is very simply described as a predator. Um, and as it turns out, this is only like one among like a myriad, like hundreds, thousands of other variations. There were like predators that instead of like having hand claws, they had like toe claws akin to like a velociraptor. Um,
Okay.
there were some with very elongated snouts that like might have been good for like fishing or such. Um, and so, um, yeah, in this variation, um, um, yeah, this one very evidently like, especially in regards to like the skull structure, is very still much like similar to human, um, and like a lot of these variations of the predators like very much resembled like um they took on forms very akin to like our current like cryptid mythological creatures, werewolves, vampires, chupacabras. um and so like it's it's actually kind of like a poetic sort of deal. It's like humanity invented these creatures, and then in the end, they became the creatures. Um, yeah, there's not a whole lot to say. They did occupy a variety of different environments, hunted down many of various creatures. Some of them they were even related to. Um, So people evolved into cryptids. I like it. Is Mothman hot?
Okay, okay, I can answer that one. Zaladin? Zaladin, my friend. Mothman is absolutely hot. Not a question.
And that's coming from a lesbian.
I have strong feelings about cryptids. You know this.
Absolutely. Um, I think the more I have to add as far as predators go, they very much did have like more evolutionary incentive to retain some of their intelligence, given like a lot of predators have to rely on intelligence in order to catch their prey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like, the similarities don't quite end with just like facial structures or relative body plan. Yeah. So predators. Next up.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, well, I mean, the hind legs just instantly read giraffe to me. The front claws, like the whole posture reminds me of like our understanding of like dinosaur bone structure, like lurching forward in that way,
Hmm.
just with much longer reach. And the head just it looks like somebody stuck a hedgehog on top of this creature. It really just looks like there's a hedgehog piloting a meat Gundam. That's all we got here.
Maurice Sendak looking guy. I don't know who that is, but you're probably right. Um,
One moment.
so, nah, I'm not gonna look it up. I want to explain like what the heck is going on here. Um, so, in contrast to the aforementioned predators, this is, very simply put, the prey. Um,
Okay.
oh, he did where the wild things are. I gotcha.
Oh, th- yes. Yes. Very that.
Yeah, I see it. Um, so, um, unlike the Titan, um, like this is very much like not an actual tree. This is more like just a shrub.
Hmm.
Um, and like their stature is about as tall as like your typical human. Um, about all there is to say about the prey is they specifically served as like the food stocks for the various predators. When the queue like filtered them through all sorts of different planets and environments. Um, yeah, basically just invented like their own little Serengetis, and like predators gotta eat. Um, and unlike the predators, they had less incentive to be like more intelligent. They All they really relied on was running, hiding, or finding food, and mating. Um, and you are
So a lot like horse.
pretty much. And you were kind of onto something as far as like their dinosaur-like stature. Like this one specifically, like was designed kind of like having legs akin to that of like a bird. Um, and so yeah, like and then hands and forelimbs being able to grasp at shrubs, maybe like low-hanging fruit. Um, yeah, like they mainly just frequented across like grasslands, open like clearings, forested areas, etc. There were likely many varieties of the prey as well. Evolution and whatnot. It still happens even when the Q aren't looking. Um,
Hmm. Much to their dismay, I'm sure.
um, so yeah, there's probably like a myriad of other varieties of the prey that specifically uh, aren't really like brought up too much in the book. This is really the only one we have on reference. So yeah, that's the prey. Um,
Okay.
I won't get over like the hedgehog Gundaming of
I'm right.
You are right, and you should say it. Next.
Okay. More giraffe. More giraffe vibes. Except with dew claws that look like feet. Or just, huh. I mean, they're definitely dew claws. They, those are probably, okay, okay, I see. They did the horse thing. Like, a lot of them are just like fingers or
Mm-hmm.
appendages that kind of just lost use and are just kind of hanging on there.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is a particularly tall creature, that's not great for her bones. Huh. I do like it though.
Yeah.
It's very. I'm assuming it's an herbivore
Mm-hmm.
based on what I think is in its mouth, or maybe those are just whiskers.
There's there's some like wiggle room for interpretation as to
Okay.
what that is.
It it looks like whiskers, or I guess what a mustache would evolve into.
Yeah. Like a Fu Manchu.
Yes, but they have to be like a sensory thing. Like they
Yeah.
remind me of a catfish at this point.
Yeah, kinda. Um, okay, so, really quick, I will mention for Zaladin's sake, the Q are basically these dragonfly looking dudes. Let me just. These guys. Um, they basically, took future humanity and, they have a god complex and like they had unmatched genetic engineering capabilities, and they basically fucked up humanity in every which direction, and saw fit as they pleased. And they were like a nomadic alien species, so after they were done, they kind of left for the next spiral arm of the galaxy and left all of their, like, pretty much all of their creations to fend for themselves. So, yeah. Um, So back to this. Um, these these critters are what are known as the mantelopes. Um,
On the note, I appreciate it.
um, so you are correct that they are herbivores, um, grazers specifically,
Hmm.
and the kind of the whole deal with the mantelopes is actually pretty tragic. So um, there were like a number of different post-human species that were engineered for like very specific use, like in particular
Hmm.
to like the Q. Um, so the mantelopes were one such species where they had a very specific role. And as such, like they live on a planet that's relatively free of predators and such. But they were one of the few species that were allowed to retain their sapience, but with a very, very huge catch. Um, Mainly, they were engineered specifically as memory retainers and like vocal singers, like just for cue entertainment. Um,
Interesting.
and so they were changed, like physiologically to such a degree that even though like they were still very capable of like complex ideas, self-awareness, and like complex communications with each other and such, um, genetic, you know,
Oh,
just maybe. um, So the thing with the mantlepes is that, um, regardless of their retained intelligence, um, they're even though they kept their minds, their bodies, as you can see, were left incredibly unfit to really do anything. Um, aside from like run, gallop, and, take on the role, the niche of grazing herbivores.
Mhm.
Um, and so, like, you know, the mantelopes, after the queue left, like, their entire, like, cultures were pretty much founded on sort of like this collective depression and, like, sort of nihilism, where, like, you know, we,
Oh,
we are like we maintain our intelligence, but like we have no way to manipulate the world around us. So like what good is that intelligence? And so like a lot of their songs were revolving around like their sorrows and like they're just melancholy of just being stuck, like just for generations, like trapped. Maybe they could have developed like very, very basic tools, but like,
how would they use them? Like,
right,
how would they use them in
like,
increasingly complex ways when they don't have the physical ability to manipulate them that way?
right, like the best they would have is their mouth, which, like, you probably don't want to
Well,
put,
what?
um, you probably don't want to put too many, various things into your mouth, um,
Yeah, that's fair.
especially if they're very prone to dropping onto the dirt floor. So, um,
Yeah, you you make a good point.
um, and so yeah, and the story doesn't quite end there. See, here's the thing. After the queue left, and I mentioned, um, like evolution will do its thing regardless of, especially if no one is looking. Um, and so, another thing is that, like, intelligent as we are today, like, if natural selection were to so dictate that the intelligence serves us no purpose to, or like gives us any benefit to our survival, like, it's very likely that over the course of generations, like, we could lose that intelligence. Um, and that's exactly what happened with the mantelopes because, um, a non sapient grazer survives just as, if not better, or, yeah, survives better, if not just as well, as a sapient grazer. So, like, over time, like, their songs grew more unintelligible, their cultures, uh, digressed or, like, uh, disintegrated? I'm looking for a different word, but like they just kind of filtered out as their intelligence kind of petered out with them, and they were left to be nothing more than just grazing herbivores.
That is. Well, I mean, in the grand span of the species' existence, that's. I mean, it could be worse, but that's not great.
Yeah. Um, like the best silver lining there is that they didn't go extinct. So there's that.
True, they did not follow the same fate as the Titans, but I mean, they sure got depression along the way.
Uh-huh.
It's, it's not really an improvement, is it?
Um,
Oh gosh.
but just as sort of a vague forewarning,
Hmm.
the mantelopes did not get the worst of it.
Oh no.
Um, so next, we have this dude.
What a little guy. Okay, this one's my favorite.
So far.
So far, they're like shark manatees.
Yeah. Um,
I don't have anything more intelligible than that. Like this is clearly a predatory mammal, but I want to hug it, despite that probably being an awful idea.
um, so, about all there is to say is these are the swimmers. Um, you'll notice like a reoccurring trend is that like a lot of the names of these posthumans are not the most creative. Um, it does get a little better um, as we move in, but um, the swimmers they pretty much had the same amount of um, like genetic variety as like the predators and the prey. Um, they took way more forms than just this. Um, and the thing with the swimmers
Hmm.
is that um, the book outlines like they were one of the species that were kind of able to retain some intelligence. Um, However, one of the caveats was that communication was difficult because being underwater, they had trouble kind of conveying a lot of their ideas to each other. Um, but otherwise, yeah, like they came in various types, various varieties, filled various niches in their underwater environments, and about their is really to say other than that is that they did manage to survive for quite a while. So, um, yeah.
Now, when you say survive for quite a while, I'm assuming that wasn't forever?
You'll learn more as we delve deeper. Um,
Oh boy.
so, but for now, like, there's no need to worry about the swimmers. They're doing a-okay in their circumstances.
Joke's on you. I'm always worrying. They'll be fine. Probably.
um, but yeah, like, I am inclined to agree. Like, they do look very huggable.
It's a smile you can trust. And teeth you should maintain the safe distance from.
Um, I think I will say, like, it is kind of difficult to judge their exact scale because, like, it's the ocean,
Mhm.
and, like, without any sort of reference point, like, the oceans really mess with, like, your ability to gauge scale or perceive it. So, like, I don't imagine that these swimmer dudes grew any bigger than like a large porpoise or maybe like a shark or something. But there were probably species that did like grow to impressive sizes. So,
Be really interesting to see like a blue whale sized.
well, um, I know I did want to save like mentioning it until like the very very end, but like there is a dedicated subreddit to all tomorrows, and they are littered with various interpretations and fan creations revolving around these species. So if you find yourself intrigued further, that's probably like the best place to go. Um,
Oh yeah.
but moving on, this one, not too much to remark by comparison.
Now, Am I remarking on one, the other, or both?
You do whatever sings to your heart's content.
Hmm. Okay. Well, here on the left we have, I mean, again, it gives me kind of proto-human vibes, like more body hair, a much bigger hindbrain, and I'm going to assume that is something akin to a domesticated Komodo dragon, or something similar, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not at odds with each other, so I have to imagine there is something symbiotic about their relationship. I just don't know what.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're pretty much right on the money. These are the lizard herders, and the book describes them explicitly as the lucky ones. Um,
Oh, no.
so, specifically, the lizard herders are these, the humanoids. Um,
Mhm.
and really, their whole deal is that as far as genetic manipulation and engineering goes, they really saw like a very minimal amount of manipulation. Um, the only thing is that they were essentially lobotomized um, to such an extent that like they, they still could function as like, they could still survive like on animalistic instincts and whatnot, but
Mhm.
they were essentially the Q basically stunted a few a few genomes to make it so that their brains essentially could not achieve sapience ever again. Um, so
Jeez.
like they were perpetually mentally stunted, um, and so part of how they kind of came to survive, regardless of that, is you hit it like through symbiotic relationships with other species. One in particular being this sort of a neo lizard species that goes unnamed. Um, when I look at it, I kind of think like maybe a successor of like iguanas.
I
Um,
can see it. Or like snapping turtles.
well, kinda. The thing that kind of tips me off is like, of course, the long tail, and then the fact that it's munching on like little shrubs, like it's implied to be an herbivore.
Mhm.
Um, and so, kind of the relative story of the lizard herders and the relative lizards is that the lizard herders, really just kind of tagged along with the lizards for survival. And, being mentally stunted, they didn't really have much capacity to, work in any way other than that. Um, however, the lizards, on the other hand, they come into play a little later. And let's just say they picked up a few tricks along the way.
Okay. Well, I'm curious to see what tricks those are.
Okay, so next.
All right then. There is so much going on here. Okay. So for one, gopher? Two, the way they're sticking up out of the ground and with like the leaf like protrusion from what I can only assume is their mouth, it sort of reminds me of carnivorous plants
Mm-hmm.
crossed with gophers. And a great deal of confusion, mostly on my part. They have they have beaks and disturbingly human eyes, and that little curl that I think might be ears? Maybe? I I do not know what I'm looking at.
Shall I elaborate?
Please. I have so many questions, but none of them are coherent.
So, what you are looking at are known as the tempters. Um, and right off the bat, the very clearest distinction is that they are very, very sexually dimorphic. Um, what you see here is the female, and then right here is a male.
Okay, I see.
Um, and as far as like your comments about their features, um, I think it's sort of like indicative, like this entire section is based entirely around like what would have been their skull. Um, so like right here you have like the hair that would grow
Mhm.
on the scalp and such.
Oh, that's hair. Okay.
Um, and then right here, like this little indent right here, I'm pretty sure that's where the ears were. And
Okay.
then this little thingy is their nose.
Oh, okay, I see it now.
And then like their eyes were like dragged forward um, so much further along their snout. Um, and I know the book kind of describes like these are explicitly beaks, but like if I look kind of closely at them, I'm inclined to think like, obviously like they're serrated,
Mhm.
um, but like I'm almost inclined to think like those little edges are specifically where the teeth are, and everything else is just their gums. I don't
Good.
I don't think anybody else that I've met has had a similar idea. And then I assume this is like part of their lip, um, like their lower lip.
I would assume so. It looks so specifically like the structure of a leaf.
Yeah,
I
like,
feel like that would be intentional.
um, yeah, like I have an idea as what it could be used for, but I'll get to that like in a second. So the tempters, pretty much their only function as far as the Q are concerned is that they basically served as living decorations that just were rooted and scattered across their planet. Um, Very crude, very disturbing, um, but nevertheless, like it was the Q's vision, um, and so the whole dynamic with the Tempters is that females are born like, whoops, um, they're born like rooted and submerged in the soil, um, from birth, and then they basically just grow affixed to the same spot all their life. Um,
Interesting.
and then the males, um, the males are still allowed to like move about and perform various tasks. Essentially, they developed a dynamic very akin to like ants or bees, where like the females are the queens, and then a myriad of different males would perform various tasks for her, like workers, drones, soldiers, etc.
Okay. I'm following.
Um, and their prime method of communication was through like crude vocalizations as well as exchanging of pheromones, which I'm inclined to think like are like distributed through these like sac-like things. I'm inclined to think, but I can't be sure. I don't think anybody can be sure, except for the author. Um,
Sometimes even that's not a guarantee, but I am definitely picking up what you're putting down. That's
yeah, so um, essentially, as far as like their intelligence is concerned, like clearly, like the females kind of had the advantage. Um, like they had much more incentive to like think and plan and organize, and particularly to order around their legions of males. And the males, by comparison, were kind of mindless in their own respect. Like they just did whatever the females kind of wanted them to. Um, and
they're
then,
drones.
yeah, drones. And essentially, probably one of their, other like starkest aspects is that, so the females, essentially, their cervix was extended outside of their body, and up until like there was just this vaginal opening right on the surface. And essentially, how they mate is that they take, a drone and like kind of summon it down into the vaginal canal like
Hmm.
a subway commuter, and they do the business, and then the male is expelled out, and etc., etc.
That sure is a process.
Yes.
Huh.
um
Huh. Okay.
yeah. So um in essence, like, despite everything that um you know current day humans would find, disturbing about the process, nevertheless, as far as like developing societies and such, like they kind of had something going for them. Like they were just on the precipice of figuring out like how to develop a culture and such. But um, a stray comet happened to ram into their planet and wipe all of them out before anything could develop. So,
Oh my goodness.
so yeah, the Tempters are no more. Um, and again, they were pretty much designed just to be like living, fleshy abstractions of like decorative art for the queue to just divulge themselves in, and pretty much no further function than that.
Well, I mean, it is an interesting look into like the Q's sense of aesthetics.
Indeed.
That's all I can really say. I have so much to process about specifically this one.
um, so after this mess, we have.
Are those, is that a beak?
You could say that.
Oh, that looks so painful. Oh no. Like the species clearly has use of like tools and the motor skills required to manipulate them, although with one less digit.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just those beaks though.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are definitely jaws that have been shuffled a little bit,
Yeah.
but not a lot else has changed. It's interesting.
So what you were looking at is in very similar vein to predators and prey. Like these folks come in all different shapes and sizes, um, and various traits that they evolved over time. But these dudes specifically are called the Bone Crushers. um, they
Of
stand
course they are.
they stand at a rather impressive 3 meters tall.
Oh, oh wow.
Um, and the book explicitly describes them as very similar to like what we would think of like ogres or trolls.
Okay.
And the Bone Crushers, so what they have kind of going on here is, specifically with their jaws and the beaks and such, so their beaks are derived pretty much entirely from their teeth, and I want to think that like their lip muscles and such have just atrophied to a point so that like the beaks can actually be functional.
Mm.
Otherwise, like you might have a situation akin to like beavers where like their teeth are ever growing, and if they don't shorten them down like at appropriate times, like they just become incapable of eating or doing anything with them and just promptly starve to death. In which case, like, I like to think that the Q were probably like more mindful than to let something like that happen.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. I'm not confident.
So, in spite of their rather intimidating size and stature, the Bone Crushers were specifically scavengers, and they partook in the feast of carrion and rotten meat. And so, actually, I might mention that probably as like a last note, but as far as their intelligence goes, over time they did manage to resurface, like their sapience, and they actually they essentially kind of got to a point where they very easily could have started like developing sort of like a society very akin to like the medieval ages, where like it's basic by our standards, but like overall, like it's their intelligence did like kind of rebound to an impressive degree. Um, and Probably the one catch in their development, though, is that as their society started to flourish, they started to run into sort of a food problem, where essentially like carrion and rotten meat, like that's specifically what they were meant to eat. And just as their population grew bigger and bigger, like there was just no way to like efficiently manage the food supplies, and they eventually starved themselves into extinction.
Yeah, I I would imagine it's pretty hard to carry on like that.
I see what you
Sorry.
did there.
I regret nothing. I regret nothing. That is unfortunate, though.
Yeah. Um, but just as a final note, do you do you want to know how the Bone Crushers specifically, like they were capable of like vocal communications and such, but you want to know specifically how they displayed affection for their mates?
Is that a trick question? Of course I want to know.
Defecation.
Well, shit. I mean, hey. If it works, it works. And no, I don't have anything poetic to say about that. No, that if it works,
You
you're welcome.
you didn't miss a beat.
I learned from the best. What can I say?
I love you.
I love you too. Uh,
Okay,
hmm.
next on the list. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I wasn't prepared for that, but I'm a. Whew. Oh, that is mood whiplash. So I'm going to assume, not going to look at the images. Yikes. They're used for structures, I'm assuming?
Eh.
Or, the less pleasant alternative, meat Legos? So cursed. Please tell me about them.
So, you know how I said that the Mantelopes didn't have the worst of the Q's wrath?
You know, I might have underestimated a little bit how much wrath was going to be involved.
So, very
What
specifically,
did they do to earn this?
um, well, the background to these organisms is that they hail from a planet where, when the Q arrived, um, the star people in question were impressively able to hold off two waves of invasions of the Q, and then they failed on the third.
Ah,
And the Q were not happy about it. Um, and so, in their in their space dragonfly sense of justice, they wanted to concoct probably the best and yet cruelest punishment they could for these star people colonists in particular. Which, by the way, these creatures are specifically known as the colonials. Probably from the namesake of star people
mhm.
colonists, yeah. So, what the Q devised was to genetically alter them into essentially mats of, like, bricks of flesh, um, that, um, so you see, like, they were allowed to keep, like, their eyes and such, um, meat Legos, sure. Um, and so, they had eyes to observe their surroundings, and
Hmm.
believe it or not, those slits that you see, those are not mouths.
Oh no, what are
I'll tell you in a moment. Um,
they?
so, um, they were these colonials were designed basically as like a very like they were designed something similar to like the Portuguese man o' war, where like it's a bunch of smaller individual like animal-like organisms that kind of formed into vast colonies.
Mhm.
Um, Probably another justification for their namesake. Um, and the thing is, like, they were all interconnected with a very crude sort of collective nervous system. Um, and so, without mouths, they essentially had to feed through um, essentially like materials filtering in through their skin.
Mhm.
And their prime source of food were Q waste products.
Ah,
So, kind of took a note, or kind of took a page or two from the Bone Crusher's book. Um, And so, like, they were given a very lowly, pathetic existence. Um, so, those slits, you see, so the colonials, the way they reproduce is
Mhm.
is basically they're capable of reproducing both sexually and asexually. Um,
Okay.
and as far as like adaptation and natural selection is concerned, they were actually very, very efficient. Um, like over the course of generations, like they quickly like covered huge swaths of like the continents on their planets just in like this quilt-like pattern of flesh. Just myriads of various colonies of colonials. And the worst part, the worst part
Mm-hmm.
by far, is that, like, this was done specifically as, like, recompense for, resisting the queue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, like, what good does punitive justice really serve if the one being punished is kind of incapable of understanding that they're being punished? And so, like, specifically, every single instance of these flesh bricks are allowed to retain their sapience. Every single one is fully self aware, fully aware of their circumstances, and are completely powerless to do anything except mindlessly reproduce and filter literal shit through their skin.
There is so much to unpack there, but I would really rather set the suitcase on fire. That's effective torture. I mean,
Uh-huh.
this. I'm trying to find literally anything for my brain to process this with.
Needless
And
to...
now
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, now it's just Terraria's wall of flesh, but with more agony, I think, per square inch.
Absolutely. Um, and
Ugh.
and so, like, being fully aware and such, and having the cognitive awareness of their situation. Needless to say, the colonials were, like, internally just begging to go extinct. Unfortunately, they were specifically designed to be very efficient in their survival methods. So they lasted. They lasted a long time.
Those are colonials.
So,
They're like cells with feelings.
yeah. Essentially, like, this whole section of the book is dedicated as, like, sort of a shout out to I have no mouth and I must scream.
It's pretty effective. Man, I hate this. I hate this so much.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So, moving on to this horrifying, pathetic, miserable mat of existence.
Yeah, I'm good never seeing that again in my life.
We...
Okay, we can work with this. This is a market improvement. Okay, we've got sort of a pterodactyl, sort of Archaeopteryx thing, sans feathers going on.
Mm-hmm.
I can appreciate that. I mean, it's very streamlined.
Mm-hmm.
The the shape of the head is definitely raptor-like, just with like jaws, like human-like jaws instead of a beak.
Mm-hmm.
Though with the shape of their eyes, I can't help but wonder if they're not really a predator species? Or maybe it's just meant to make it still look human in an uncanny way. I don't know.
Hmm. Well, these, simply put, are the flyers. Um, once again, kind of, it's a whole deal where, like, there's many different variations um, of these species of various form and function. Um, although, one thing that is kind of remarkable about the flyers specifically, at least these ones in particular, is that the Q kind of engineered them to have. The book describes them as like turbine like circulatory systems, um, which
Okay.
means like their hearts, like I know it's described like their hearts were very resemblant of like starfish in shape,
Hmm.
and it turned out like this method of, pumping blood through their bodies was so efficient and so powerful that it did actually allow the flyers to both maintain the ability to fly as well as keeping their brains relatively strong. And so, like, they still had the makings to, like, reattain intelligence alongside being able to fly. So, yeah. Um,
Very cool.
and,
That's terrific.
yeah. Although, as much as, like, efficient as these flyers were, they didn't go extinct, but, like, those, that same efficient, like, circulatory system would kind of come back to bite them later on. So, yeah. Um, and yeah, of course, sadly, gotta censor the titty. Um,
For shame, for shame.
yeah. Um, but next up, oh my.
Not a lot left to the imagination with that censor bar there, huh?
I know.
So, okay. This is. They remind me of mammalian frogs. This looks like it's underwater. And the webbed. Well, they're not fins, but the webbed hands would be ideal for either gliding or for travel through water. The very large eyes are good for taking in light when necessary. So, being able to see is clearly an important part of this species, like, survival cycle.
You know, I have to admit, like, um,
Hmm.
I guess I should explain. These are not meant for swimming, but
Okay.
I'm surprised that nobody else has really thought of that. Like, those easily could be fins. Um, I'll have to, I'll have to consult the subreddit on this. Um, but so I think like this species was kind of an offshoot of the flyers.
Hmm.
Um, not necessarily like a descendant, but like they kind of evolved along the same time. Um, but like whereas the flyers themselves were kind of blessed in like their efficient body functions and such, these hand flappers did not really get so great a deal. They kind of drew the short straw. Um, so specifically, um, the hand flappers, they those hands slash wings do exactly what you think they would do. They flap, and they flap a lot. And the thing is, really the only thing they're good for is just like being flapped for like sexual availability and like trying to attract mates and such. Um, but needless to say, like even if they held on to like a shred of their intelligence, um,
Hmm.
clearly like these are not functional as wings, so they could not achieve lift. But at the same time, they were completely useless as hands too. So, like, they had a shred of intelligence, but kind of like the mantelopes, there was no way to really practice it. Um, Although, like, as far as like their own attitudes towards this situation, I think like the hand flappers were at least lucky enough that they weren't already like sapient by the time like they became like this. So like they kind of had an easy way out. They pretty much just flapped those useless webbed hands of theirs pretty much all the way into extinction.
Goodness grievance. They're like bats, but worse in every way. A shame.
Yeah.
Oh
Um,
my.
Hand flappers. Then we got these dudes.
Okay. A lot going on here. The ears remind me simultaneously of mice and elephants. The latter especially helped with the whiskers. And they have decidedly uh no eyes
Indeed.
and extremely long fingers. Extra phalanges and all.
Uh-huh.
So what is the deal with the blind folk here?
Well, believe it or not, that's what they're called.
Oh,
um,
nice.
so, the blind folk. The background is that, um, naturally there were colonies of star people that after hearing about, after learning about what, like, after learning about the Q and what they were all about, um, by contrast to, say, like the colonials, a lot of colonists just kind of vied to, like, run and hide. Um, and the star people that the blind folk descended from specifically tried to retreat into underground networks and caverns. Um, it didn't work. The Q found them.
Indeed.
The Q found them anyway, and they were kind of like, "Hey, so we know what you were trying to do. Like, if you really wanted to retreat underground, like so badly, like allow us to assist." And so they turned them into these, yeah, kind of humanoid mice, with disturbingly smooth swaths of skin where their eyes were. Um, and so, like, the ears and the whiskers and such, they were still perfectly adapted for life in eternal darkness. And, they had to rely effectively on, like those appendages and their whiskers to feel around, and then, using like shrill banshee screams in order to get a sense of their surroundings. Um, and then the ears that are properly equipped to echolocate. Thing is, they weren't really the only underground dwellers that lived down there. There were like insects and like descendants of bats that were hugely predatory. Um, so like the blind folks' daily survival struggle was just that, still a struggle. Um, and they they could have had like some capacity to kind of rebound into some form of society, whatever that might have looked like, considering they're entirely blind. But what ended up happening is they lived on a planet that happened to have very temperamental plate tectonics. And so,
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
and so, essentially, essentially they were all smushed into extinction. Um, and what's kind of interesting about this picture in particular is that it kind of showcases um, kind of like their strategy for surviving in the underground with other like echolocating predators. So it's specifically a male and his daughter. Um, and the male here is depicted as being like dead still, like motionless, whereas the daughter is clearly freaking out over being discovered and screaming into the darkness. So this was essentially their own like defense strategy, because like if you stay perfectly still and something is trying to find you through echolocation, you could easily be mistaken for just like a stalagmite or something.
Right.
And so like clearly the father knows what to do, but like that daughter is probably in trouble. Um, and then for sustenance, like you can see, like there were myriads of different fungus that thrived in the underground. Um,
Okay.
so they had.
For a second, I thought those were tiny homes, but that makes no sense. No sense.
It would be cute. Um, I mean, obviously they wouldn't fit, but like tiny little, like little, little gnome peoples.
Exactly.
That would be adorable. Um, Next up.
I wish you could see the face I'm making right now. Okay, let's take this one step at a time. So, there's some interesting asymmetry going on here. There's a lot going on here. So they have, well, 4 hands, 3 of which are considerably more stout. Like this looks like a photo taken on a microscope slide.
Yeah.
Like we're seeing like the 2-dimensional projections of these 3D creatures. And maybe that's just because I'm used to a certain kind of symmetry, but this is beyond wonky in a lot of interesting ways.
Mm-hmm.
The smaller creatures are adorable,
Yeah.
but I mean the extended hand has a lot of like pale man energy going on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, damn, I never thought of it that way. You're so right.
There's just so much.
Okay, so allow me to explain. So
Please.
this living Picasso painting is these guys are known as the Lopsiders, and you can clearly see why. Um, so the reason they look like this is because the Q basically engineered them to live on a planet that has very heavy gravity. And so, under such strenuous forces of gravity, they essentially had to thrive as pancake people. And welcome, Creed Heart.
That's the energy I was thinking of, Creedheart. Like, this seems like the cell stage of Spore gone horribly, horribly wrong.
um, so, yeah, specifically, their their one arm and both of their legs were regressed into just kind of like flat fins to kind of shuffle across the landscape. Um, and then, like, only one side of their faces kind of, like, they kind of received a flounder treatment. Like, it's only one side of their skull.
Hmm.
Like, we have one eye that's looking directly up, and then the other eye directly looking forward to, still get a fair sense of their surroundings. Um, and despite everything, despite the heavy gravity and their form, um, you know, needless to say, like, one of their limbs was still, like, retained to act as a sort of, like, antenna, where, like, just a limb to be able to manipulate their surroundings to some extent. Um,
Right.
and so, like, regardless of everything going on here, they did actually manage to kind of rebound into intelligence. Um, into, like, developing society back up again. Well, I say back up, but it was probably just as pancake-like as they were. Um, and, it's kind of demonstrated in this picture because those little critters were essentially kind of like the lopsiders, like the closest thing they had to, like, domesticated cattle. And so, like, you can see, like, with their long hand, they're kind of like feeding the little critters, kind of taking care of
Cute.
them. So, like, despite, like, the horrifying imagery, it's kind of got a wholesome nature to it.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. This is not the worst thing you've shown me tonight.
Absolutely not.
Like, I kind of like these, but I mostly like their cattle.
Yeah.
They remind me of baby spiders.
You know what they remind me of? They remind me
What?
of tardigrades.
Yes.
Little
That's
sea bears.
perfect.
And, with taking care of those little dudes, like, no wonder they succeeded.
You'd have to succeed with that.
Next up,
Okay. So we have a sort of zebra striping. Or, I mean, I guess it's just human striping that's been turned on. Again, with the elongated fingers, like very, very lean, very long necks. Probably herbivores for getting, like, plant matter from very high places.
hmm,
And I'm assuming the little frill on top is a sensory organ.
hmm,
Maybe.
maybe. Um, so this is a strider, and they essentially have to deal with the opposite conditions of the lopsiders, where the lopsiders lived on a very heavy gravity planet. The striders lived on a moon that was very low gravity, and so they were allowed to stretch very tall. Um, and I know I mentioned, like, you were wondering how the Titans could have grown so big, with, like, the square cube law in place and everything. And my theory is low gravity.
That would do it.
Um, I know I kind of like to think like maybe that frill is something like akin to what you would find in like a Spinosaurus, where it was mainly used like to um like radiate heat or like regulate heat.
Mm.
Um, I'm not entirely sure how warm or hot the moon was, but um, I mean from the environment we can see in the picture, it kind of resembles like Savannah. Like I don't know. Is there
And it looks like there are two suns.
maybe
Maybe.
maybe. If they're herbivores, then the stripes must indicate a need to provide camouflage from a predator of some kind. At least that's my theory. Well, interesting you say that. For you see, even though the Striders were very fit for their low gravity environment, they kind of went excessive with it. Like, you see just how spindly and twiggy those limbs are. Um, so even under like such low gravity circumstances, like if a Strider were to take a fall, like those bones are breaking immediately. Um, so like they're effectively kind of like horses. They can't risk falling for anything, or else like it kills them.
That's it. Not ball game.
And they, regardless, they might have done pretty well for themselves if it wasn't for one problem. Um, so naturally, they were not the only ones on their home moon, and indeed, they had predators to worry about. Specifically, predators that were kind of. It just seemed like perfectly adapted for taking down these dudes. They were kind of like velociraptors, and they descended directly from earth chickens. So, um,
I feel like Earth chickens would be proud.
indeed, like, they are the closest living descendants to T-Rexes, so,
Mhm.
like, kind of returning to form. Um, they probably grew quite big, too. If we had to be honest, low grav and all. Um, so yeah, essentially, like, the Striders were extincted by neo chickens,
Yo, chicken.
and yes, it's very meme worthy.
It makes me so happy.
um, I know, like, there was at least like one Redditor that kind of had an idea of like a branching species or like descending species of the Striders that specifically did like kind of as Creedhart suggested, like kind of hid in and among the trees, um, sort of like camouflage themselves. Like, there's camouflaging amongst like the foliage, and then there's camouflaging as the tree.
It's the stick bug method.
Absolutely.
I honestly like that a lot.
Yeah. Um, okay. Next up, I will say I don't actually remember entirely what the chronological order of each individual species is, so it's almost kind of as much a surprise to you as it is, or to me as it is to you, in a way.
Oh, good.
In a way. Um, like I wasn't expecting to immediately hit the colonials when I did, so. Um, next. Oh dear.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I see vestigial thumbs, and I see fingers that have become hooves. It's sort of like a gecko, sort of like a flea, and sort of like a nightmare come to life. Fascinating. I hate it so much.
What?
I like the underside of it absolutely reminds me of like a flea under a microscope, which is not great.
Mm-hmm.
Give me the spiel.
Simply put, these are the parasites.
Well,
Um,
I'm glad I keyed into that.
um, I was just gonna mention, like, you were saying you hate it, and there's at least one little detail that I know is gonna make it worse.
Go on.
Um, so, just like the flyers and the predators and the prey, they came in multiple different kinds, suited to different forms of parasitism. Um,
Hmm.
these ones you could pretty easily surmise, like, are, fit to be, like, latching on and, like, sucking blood, um, on, like, hosts, which I will say there were, like, host post-humans that did serve as a food source, um, for all these various parasites. Um, and I want to say, like, it's kind of variable depending on, like,
Hmm.
your computer screen and resolution and such, but, like, I want to say, like, the picture of this parasite is about, like, actual size. Like, they're kind of puny.
That's not better.
um, but
I don't love that.
yeah, still pretty, yes, host humans, if you will. Like, I know I said, like, they're kind of puny, but, like, for parasites, like, compared to, like, ticks or fleas, like, they're still kind of, like, massive. They're more akin to, like, sea lampreys or leeches.
Yeah.
Um, but anyhow, so I know specifically the book outlines there was one type of parasite, like, subspecies, and the
Hmm.
and the way they performed their parasitism was actually kind of horrifying. So they essentially would they would find female hosts, and they would find ways to burrow into their wombs and parasite them from the inside.
I mean, that is an effective method of parasitism.
Yeah, it was probably excruciatingly painful.
Almost definitely.
um, but as far as all of those simultaneous species of parasites go, um, they all pretty much, like, they all kind of extincted themselves because, like, they didn't have the intelligence of foresight to know that, like, hey, what we're doing to these hosts is not really so good in the long term. We're kind of killing them off, especially the womb one. Like, um, you know, we're we're killing away our food stocks, but of course, like, being essentially animals, they they didn't know any better. They had no way to really tell that they would, do so much harm, and so they all kind of drifted away and died out. All except this one. Because this one, um, it was just a meager bloodsucker, and essentially over time, um, it was probably just by sheer coincidence, but, like, the way they, like, filtered, or is the term parasited from their host? I don't know. But, like, the way they benefited from their host was just not as excessive as their biological colleagues, I guess I'll say. Um, So like
Fun phrasing.
so like both they and their hosts were able to survive relatively well. And the thing is, in nature, such relationships, such one-sided relationships, are actually not very common, and they don't tend to last forever. Um, so, what ended up happening over several generations is that the parasites and hosts gradually kind of grew into sort of like from a parasitic to a symbiotic relationship. And, all the various, like, small benefits that came with that over time. And we'll say, like, it kind of came to a head at some point, um, where, like, it eventually, like, grew into sort of a state of codependency. Like, they
Hmm.
literally could not survive without each other. Um, but then it kind of branches out from there, which I know later on we will explore um, when we get to it. Next up.
If we're just looking at the head, my knee-jerk reaction is reverse centaur. And then you get to I mean, they're claws, obviously. They
Mm-hmm.
remind me of scorpion stingers. I'm assuming they are mostly just for hooking things and given their height and given where this one is standing, probably hooking things in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Do they fish? Is that their thing?
Mm-hmm. Um, these dudes, these guys, are the finger fishers.
Oh, well, there you go.
Um, indeed, they were engineered to have their middle digits extended out and ending in hook-like claws to easily scoop up fish, and then their snouts were elongated and fitted with razor-sharp teeth to, befit a fish-eating predator. Um,
Okay, so that's why the long face. Got it.
mhm. And compared to um, a lot of other organisms, their place, like their kind of evolutionary history, would kind of grow to be rather interesting in the future. Very interesting indeed, because the planet that they lived on um, it was just like littered with various islands and archipelagos. So, like, there was an abundance of various aquatic creatures to feed from, um, as well as, like, if you know anything about, like, evolutionary history, like, when species split off into multiple different islands and are kind of left there for a long time, a lot of interesting adaptations happen. And
Absolutely.
and so like sort of like a vague foreshadowing, like the fingerfishers are no different. They were pretty much scattered all across the planet and occupied all these various archipelagos and inlets, peninsulas, and whatnot. Um, Peninsula is part of a larger landmass, but whatever. And so, um, you would think, like, given their very specific adaptation for fishing, um, and rather their talent for fishing, there might not be much incentive to like use those hands for like building tools or whatnot. Um, but again, interesting adaptations, and the fingerfishers indeed kind of rebound into intelligence over time. So that's another one on the list of um, post-humans that kind of where you're, like their story doesn't end just yet.
Okay. I dig the finger fishers.
So do a lot of people, but for reasons that are probably best left for more explicit streams.
Oh my.
After this... Oh boy.
Okay. That sure is something. So, this feels more avian to me.
A bit,
The
a bit.
the legs specifically remind me of Roadrunner claws,
Mm-hmm.
and the arms are the stature is a little more raptor-like, but maybe it's just because of how this creature is posed. They just look very wiggly.
I will say this picture is depicted like top down,
Okay.
so it is lying down.
Okay. That's fair.
Um, so these are what are known as the hedonists. Um, and essentially, if you want to talk about like post-humans that got lucky as far as the Q's meddling is concerned, the hedonists got probably the best possible deal. Um, they were essentially made as pampered pets of the Q. They were granted an entire planet free of natural predators, filled with an abundance of vegetation and fruits and tubers and such to feed on. And they were effectively just left to kind of live in not really a hunter-gatherer paradise. They weren't smart enough for that. But essentially like a paradise. And yeah, the reason that they're specifically known as the hedonists is that, like any creatures, they are very, they have the proclivity to have a lot of sex. Um, and, usually it's just instinctual, like purely for the sake of reproduction. And like the hedonists are not really any different. And normally, um, you know, all the circumstances I've just listed, a lot of food, no natural predators, pretty much virtually an entire planet to themselves, under the watchful eye of their caretaker Q owners. Like, normally, such circumstances would mean, like, if you had a species, like, propagate itself, sexually, like, within a very quick span of time, a shockingly quick span of time, overpopulation would, like, just steamroll into relevant issues with the species. But the Q thought of a loophole to this, or at least, a loophole they were able to manufacture. So they engineered the hedonists' reproductive systems to work in such a way that they could not produce offspring unless they just straight up had copious amounts of sex.
Oh my goodness.
Like, I'm not even positive, like, a year's worth of constant sex would even do the trick.
Oh my goodness.
Like, it certainly was a workaround. And, I figure, like, they were only allowed to, like, feed off of the various vegetation on the planet, given that, like, eventually, like, there's niches where, like, these hedonists could easily adapt into predators, but, as long as the queue were watching them, like, you're not gonna let your pet eat another person's pet, are you? Like, that's kind of,
These aren't bad fish.
yeah. Um, so, like, yeah, as long as the queue were around, the hedonists were pretty much living in heaven, their own kind of heaven. And as such, uh, they had inklings of intelligence, but, like, they kind of had no use for it because, like, who needs to think when they're having such a mind-blowingly good time? I'm pretty sure the book actually phrases it that way. um, so yeah, the hedonists, but naturally, at some point the queue, did up and leave and just abandon the hedonists, and at some point we'll get to the aftermath of what kind of went on in their little bubble, over time, over generations. Um, Next.
Okay.
I think this one is like a little. It's kind of one of the ones that are a little more evident, I think.
This one reminds me of anteaters, or at least the tongue does.
Hmm.
Other than that, my brain jumps to the word goblin.
um,
But that tongue is clearly meant for like scooping up bugs.
hmm. You are precisely on the money. These are the insectophagi. Um, they they're among, kind of in the pool of, like, on their own. They're kind of unremarkable. Um, they were given a planet with a myriad of small insects, similar to termites. Like they build mounds and stuff all over the place. Um, they evolved prehensile tongues, or like very long and flexible tongues to be able to scoop up their quarry. Um, those extended fingers were best served to dig into those mounds. Um, and then you kind of look at their facial structure. You might notice, like, kind of under, like, basically where their jaws and, like, their top, like, palate is, like, there's kind of these grooves. Um, they essentially were given, kind of an adaptation where the skin around those areas um, were kind of engineered to be sort of like leathery and sort of rough, and that would protect them from bug bites. Um,
Okay, I see.
and so, yeah, insectophagi, they were bug eating people. Um, it's pretty much all there really is to say about them. And even in the context of the story, like, they were pretty unremarkable in this form, but, like, they would play like something of a legacy, um, over the course of the rest of the book. So, more to look forward to.
More on that later.
Next. Oh, hang on just a second. Okay, I am back. Sorry for the interruption. Um, Next up, after Insectophagi.
Huh.
Yes?
Processing. They look. I mean, I feel like, is that a utility belt it's wearing? Am I misinterpreting that?
Maybe.
Huh. It I mean, it looks like a very spindly superhero sidekick. That's really the first thing that jumps to my mind. But okay, I have to assume this species is a climber because those appendages are not really adapted to much else other than grabbing onto things with a great deal of dexterity.
Well, um, they they certainly climb in a sense. Although they climb pretty much higher than most other species do. Um, this is a spacer. Um, so here's the thing: the Star People, even though many of the colonies and planets that the Star People occupied were, invaded and, messed up by the Q,
Mhm.
there were some that did manage to get away, that managed to slip through the cracks. And they were, they evolved into the Spacers, which specifically were Star People, like their ancestors were Star People that lived in hollowed out asteroids floating in space. And
Okay.
and so, you know, taking the Striders situation and bumping it up another level, they lived in environments with absolutely no gravity. And so like their limbs stretched out ever so much to be able to cling on to like various platforms and edges and like various means to kind of lift themselves down and up and across and over inside their asteroid homes. Um, and then this is kind of funny. Uh, do you know what they do to propel themselves through the vacuum of space?
Do they jump like grasshoppers?
They could, but um, like not necessarily. Like maybe if there's not
Okay.
a terribly close ledge to cling on to.
Okay. What's their main mode of propulsion then?
So as they lived in these zero gravity environments, their digestive systems became highly pressurized. And so their main means of propelling themselves through their zero grav environments is they toot. They
Okay.
they toot their way through their colonies.
Okay, so they use a gas propulsion system.
Absolutely.
Incredible. It's sort of like pneumatics, but just your body. I I both love and despair.
um, I will say, like, since, they're directly descended from the Star People and they evaded the Q pretty much entirely, they pretty much were allowed to, like, have an advanced society kind of develop at its own pace. Um, Technology got better, they grew more intelligent. You can see, like, proportionally, like, their brains, their skulls grew a bit larger in the cranial area. And of course, like, their their anuses had to be exposed virtually at all times. Um,
Of course, of course.
and yeah, the spacers, and yeah, as far as like recovering humanity from like what it once was, like the spacers by far had the biggest advantage. Um, Although, you know, being obviously clued in to the Q's activities across the galaxy, they pretty much had to keep quiet for a while. And so, like, they couldn't really interfere with a whole lot of, like, the other planets that got messed up and all the other post-human species that came through the Q's meddling. So, in a sense, like, they kind of had to stay isolationist for a while, like, over the course of, like, a million some odd years.
Wow.
Yeah, this is, like, these stories kind of span across vast stretches of time, naturally, so... Okay, yeah, we got the space tutor dudes. Um, Next... Ah,
Okay. Okay. There's there's a very classic, like, giant vibe going on here.
hmm.
That is an extremely bulbous nose. Or at least I'm assuming that's a nose.
It's probably...
With metal tools, and that looks like a maroon ship in the distance.
Probably.
They seem friendly, but I feel like I'm about to be proven wrong.
Um, First, just as a fun little tidbit, one of the trademarks uh, like, if a planet has seen Q activity, is they established many, many, many pyramids on the planets they occupied. So, like, a lot of the planets that these post-humans thrived on usually, um, had a lot of giant pyramids left over. Um, and I think before I get explaining to this dude, I'm kind of wondering how you are feeling about time. Like, how much further are you willing to go?
I think I've got a little bit more gas in the can. No offense to the spacers. I'm good for a little bit longer.
Because I will say that with this dude,
Mm-hmm.
he's pretty much the last one that's directly, like, involved. Like, the last one kind of in the first section of the book, and, like, had some connection to, like, the Q. And I was thinking, like, if you wanted to end for tonight, like, and then pick up the next sections or so, like, on a different day, like, we could do that.
I like that plan. It's a good way to segment it out.
Righto! Okay, so what you are beholding here is known as a ruin haunter. Um, so I know I said, like, the lizard herders kind of had, like, the least amount of genetic modification from the Q, although an easy runner-up would be the ruin haunters. You can see, like, they have all their digits, their feet and their leg joints are still the same, effectively. Like,
Mm-hmm.
overall, remain pretty overall unchanged from their ancestors. Um, and there's not really any known reason why, like, the Q were so lax with, um, with doing their business with the Rune Haunters. Um, I almost kind of like to think, even if it was probably over the course of millions of years, like, like you have a Q like working on the Ruin Haunters, and then their parent is like, "Hey, we gotta go. We're gonna run late for the next arm of the galaxy," and it's like, "Okay, mom," and then they just up and left. Um,
I love that.
it's probably not canon, but I like to think of it that way. Um, and so, the Ruin Haunters were kind of left to their own devices. And one thing that the Q also did alongside, like, modifying all these post-human species is erasing kind of, or like getting rid of all the former technology that the Star People had. So, like, in essence, like, it wouldn't give any of these species any ideas if they got intelligent again. Um, but the Rune Haunters and their home planet was pretty much the one exception. Um, Probably because the Q were in a hurry. Um, and so, like, a lot of the Star People technologies were left behind, just kind of scattered about the planet, and so, like, these people were free to kind of, discover and uncover, like, a lot of the remnants of their ancestry pretty quickly. Um, they grew back into sapience, like, probably the fastest out of any of the post-humans. Um, and they quickly, relearned how, a lot of the Star People technologies worked, a lot of their history, and such. And, on one hand, it made them advance, as a society, like, staggeringly fast. But there was also kind of another kind of unintended development that they kind of had to deal with on their own. And that's mainly that the Rune Haunters developed sort of this kind of cultural delusion that, like, they perfectly understood, like, they were directly descended from the Star People, but
Hmm?
I think given, like, the lack of contact with the other colonies and such, they sort of came under this impression that they were, like, the sole benefactors of the Star People.
Uh,
Like they
I see.
were like the only descendants. And so, like, despite knowing that the Star People, like, touched the stars and colonized other planets, like, they were only set to kind of assume that all the other, like, colonies failed under the Q invasion. And so, like, they kind of developed, like, almost kind of like a sense of pride that, like, hey, we came from the Star People, we endured, we survived. Um, and that kind of played a part into their overall, like, essentially, like, their culture, their society, and it kind of stuck with them for a pretty long while. Naturally, they developed further along in the story, um, but as far as those specific developments go, that will probably have to be explained next stream because it gets wild.
That, considering everything we've seen today, the fact that this is not the wild part terrifies me, and therefore I have to know.
I will say it does get wild, but it doesn't all necessarily mean, like, that doesn't necessarily mean it all goes wrong. Like,
Okay,
it's chaotic, but there's a lot of good that could be picked up from it. So,
I hear you.
um, I guess leave off, um, to leave off for next stream, whenever that will be, um, we'll head into what's essentially Act 2 of All Tomorrows, and it essentially deals with how all these post-human species did in the millions and millions of years growing and adapting after the Q left. And essentially all that came about, from all the various species that were allowed to thrive for one circumstance or another. So, I hope you look forward to that, wifey.
I certainly do. Although, I'm not thrilled about what happens to the colonials. I'm preemptively not enjoying that, but the rest, I'm excited for.
And as for my lily pals and all my audience, I hope y'all enjoyed yourselves as well. It was really fun to do this stream. I can't wait to do more. Yeah, I'm really glad you were able and willing to join me, wifey.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And indulging me in my latest fixation.
I am always happy to. This is, I mean, I don't know what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting this, but I am delighted to participate nonetheless.
Yay. Okay. I guess a question. Insofar, what would you say was your favorite entry?
Oh, that's tricky. If we're going purely by aesthetics, I would say the swimmers win. The ruin hunters they're all right. And the lopsiders, I think. Those are my favorite three. In terms of sheer what the fuck factor, the colonials. Easy.
Yeah.
Those are genuinely mortifying bricks, and I hope to never see them again, but I know I will. But all of them are really interesting. I appreciate you taking the time to introduce me to all of them.
Absolutely. It's very fun. And I mentioned to you, that, like, I was doing, like, some art stuff for All Tomorrows, but sadly, we're not to the point where I can show you yet. Like, we're not far,
Oh
we're
my.
not far enough, and I'm very sad to say.
Think of it as a great deal more build up to the grand reveal.
True. Actually, there is one thing I can show you. I just remembered. Firstly, I can remove this slideshow from OBS. And then I'll quickly end screen capture on Discord, and then just bring up. I'll do it on OBS first, so I don't keep the Lily Pals waiting. Image. Bleh. Browse. It's here somewhere. Fan art folders. Here we are. Just right here, a little bit of fan art. And then I gotta open up files. Uh, uh, hmm. Fan art, all tomorrow's, photo gallery, screen share, bam. Here we see a queue with their hedonist pet.
Aww. Aww. This is, especially now that I know the Q's reputation, this is less adorable and well, than I feel like it should be.
Yeah.
You managed to capture that perfectly, and you should be proud.
Hmm.
I really like this.
I am inclined to do more. Um, whenever.
Oh boy.
Not of this specifically, but like, of the posthumans and such. Um,
Mhm.
I will say, like, as far as like sheer material and like content goes, like this next section is gonna be heavier. Like, there's gonna be a lot more to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, this one, it was mainly like akin almost to like a safari. Like I show you a bunch of neato creatures out in the wild. Even if they came about in not so great ways. But
I
nevertheless.
I'm grateful to have gone on this safari. Horrifying though it occasionally was. That is nature.
Absolutely. Um, yep, I think that is all I can really say now for this stream. Future streams, what do I got? I know at some point we gotta get back to Wildermyth. Um, I'm hoping like maybe next Monday we could be able to do that. Hoping. Um, like we gotta finish the story. Um, and play with our friends. Um, as for solo streams, I know I got some material for doing like my next Warframe stream, so I might do that. Otherwise, I might get back to Dwarf Fortress. We'll see. We'll see. I have options. Um, do you have anything you want to promo, wifey?
At the moment, not in particular. I will say that if you are interested in tabletop RPGs, Off the Table's Twitch channel, off_the table, should be starting up um, doing our semi regular streams sometime in October or early November. Thank you, love. And potentially, we are going to be putting out like calls to the community and to Twitter to join on some of those streams. So if that is your thing, be sure to keep an eye out.
Ooh. Color me intrigued. Um, okay, I think with all this, I'm probably gonna transition to like my ending screen, but I'll figure out like who to raid, um, as like we all chill with the ending screen for a bit. So yeah, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, wifey. Mwah, 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 mwah. Um, and look forward to future streams. Woo! And to send us all off. Oh yeah, swimmy.
Oh, sweet.